Well, just generally, maybe they can just get comfortable, kind of doing what you've always been doing. As a mentor, it's my time's volunteered. So I don't get paid for that, but, I saw it as a good opportunity to kind of give back, and then also, to potentially learn, and hear problems that are happening maybe outside of my organization. You maybe don't want to continue with hiring all like full-time staff to staff up, a lending operation. You could essentially, we would provide that whole service for you, kind of white label. I don't expect everyone to be like best friends, right? But you have to have camaraderie, and you have to get along, right?
So hello, fintech leaders and builders, and I'm Vasyl Soloshchuk from Insart. And this is our next episode of Fintech CTO Podcast. And here we have talks with experienced fintech leaders who share with us their knowledge and stories and how to build great fintech products and companies. And before we start, so please subscribe to our channel, and you're also welcome to comment on this video and put all your questions below. And we will answer to all of your questions in the comments to this video. And let's start. And let me introduce our today's guest, Kyle Lamy. He's a VP of Engineering in Maxwell, a digital mortgage platform and that provides value-added services designed exclusively for small and mid-sized mortgage lenders. And as I know, Kyle graduated from Virginia Tech in 2005, and he's a very customer-focused engineering leader with over 15 years of experience. And also Kyle worked and developed products for different sizes and types of companies like Fortune 500, federal government, and also startups. And he likes to develop products with, as I know, with perfect and efficient UI, UX, and workflows. And as I know, Kyle lives in Boulder, Colorado, and he also has a great experience traveling around the world. And from what I learned about Kyle, he traveled to different parts of the world, like New Zealand, Australia, India, Thailand, and doing and acting as a photographer. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, Kyle, so please introduce yourself and tell us what's your story, and if everything is correct from what I just mentioned about you.
Yeah, I hope it is, because it comes from my bias. But yeah, good to be here. I would say, I currently live in Colorado, but I guess sort of background on how I got into engineering. Maybe a little bit less typical path, but I was not a CS major. I was my degree's in business information technology, or a lot of places might have it as management information systems. So had some development classes in college. Had some professors who said, don't, when you graduate, don't go get a job as a programmer. Like, that's not what your specialty is. It's not what your role is. And so I was kind of, I was not keen on looking for a software engineering role, but life has a way of changing your plans. And my first position was with a government consultant in DC. I was supposed to be on a project as kind of a business analyst, and then I and some others, that project kind of got held up, and we're, new grads were sitting around sort of twiddling our thumbs, and management said, hey, everyone should get your Java, what was it, Java 1.4 certifications. I have the version off. I don't remember that far back, but anyway, so I got the certification thinking, I don't know why I'm gonna get this certification, because I'm not a developer. And so I passed that, and eventually I got so bored, not doing anything. I said, I went and said, hey, put me on a project. I don't care what it is.
Okay.
If it's development, I'll do it. So that was kind of how I was thrown into the development world. And I kind of thought, hey, if I fail at this, it's not really my fault.
Okay.
But yeah, ever since then, I was kind of starting out in a consulting world. I was at Red Hat in their consulting branch for a bit, working on various projects for companies like Capital One or others. And then, moved out to Boulder back in 2012. I'd just been married about a year. So my wife and I moved out here. And part of that move was I really wanted to get involved in the startup scene. So, Boulder is big there. The other options were Austin or San Francisco, Seattle, your typical places, but Boulder kind of matched, our lifestyle a little bit more as far as the outdoors, snowboarding and things like that. So we ended up here and worked in various capacities, contracting for startups through Techstars, or attempted my own startup once or twice that didn't end up making it. But you learn a lot through the failure and continue on. So yeah, so most recently here at Maxwell, leading the engineering team with our CTO.
So do you have any preference, working for like a bigger company, bigger enterprise or organization, or like smaller company, like a startup, from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the consulting world kind of introduced me to, Capital One's huge, and I remember, I think it was at Capital One. You realize that a really, really large organization, it's hard to affect change, and you go in there kind of wanting to help, right, and see that change. And I remember there was, I think, one story that kind of sticks out. They were, for the project that I was on, whatever system they're using, I think they were using I'm blanking on the names whenever I think of names. It wasn't a JBoss. It was an Oracle web server system, and I was kind of playing in the admin functions there, and I said, hey, you don't have the auto one-click button rollback deployment enabled, and the team, I think at the time would I think there was 12 people or something. If they would need to do a deployment, it would happen on like a Wednesday night or something, everyone getting on the call, making sure, what do we have to do if something breaks, right, on that deployment.
Okay.
All hands on deck kind of deployment process. And we kind of brought up, hey, there's this setting that you can easily do a rollback if anything happens, So it's just like those things. I don't think that was implemented because, maybe some folks lose their jobs if that's the case. But that's maybe one little example to where, you see efficiencies that can be gained, and in a really, really large organization, a lot of times it's harder to gain momentum or acceptance around making some of those changes.
Why do you think it's happening? Is it because of like risk taking or non-risk taking approach? So why is it happening?
Yeah, I think when the organization gets so large and you just have so many, a lot of the cooks in the kitchen, just the change process becomes burdensome and has to go through layer over layer to see anything. So I think that's where, innovation tends to be harder to continue on. So unless there's a big push for that. I think people just generally, maybe they can just get comfortable, kind of doing what you've always been doing. And so to bring in an outside idea can be a little bit scary, maybe.
So, by the way, what was the biggest team you have managed, and what size of the teams do you prefer to manage?
Yeah, the biggest would be here at Maxwell. Like I said, I've been involved in startups and smaller teams, but the team here at Maxwell is about 31 folks.
Mm-hmm. So do you prefer like to manage bigger team, or smaller team? Again, if in big company, you maybe some changes can be done because of so many decision makers, many layers. Maybe in smaller company, you can be more efficient. So what's your view on that? Just interesting.
Yeah, I think it's different. I think the role's different once the team gets over. From a lot of my career has been in that earlier stage startup, to where there'd been, you're more hands-on. I think here, once the team starts growing, more than 10, then, you're doing less of that hands-on coding. And so I think it's just different challenges. I like the challenge of, not being the direct person as far as like, where the software is going. You have to learn to affect that change and making sure that your engineering managers or, your more experienced developers, you're coaching and trying to get them to take action, right. And to take ownership over things. And so I think the challenge is, it's the same maybe problem set, but the challenge is you have to approach it differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. By the way, you mentioned coaching, and I also read on your profile that you serve like a volunteer mentor at Plateau, and you mentioned a number of times that on your LinkedIn profile actually that you were mentoring all the teams that you manage. So what is so important about mentoring? So why mentoring?
Yeah, I think for me, I started, I don't know if folks are aware, but Plato is kind of a mentoring organization. Engineering teams can kind of sign up and pay.
Okay.
But as a mentor, it's my time's volunteered. So I don't get paid for that, but I saw it as a good opportunity to kind of give back, and then also to potentially learn and hear problems that are happening maybe outside of my organization to see, hey, is there are there themes, right? And hopefully be able to provide good insight into maybe how somebody might approach a problem or a situation that they're running into. So it's been really fun so far. I've been working with two folks for the past 6 months, and it's been really good to hear that I had some good advice, at least to help them through some things. So so that's always good. Feels good to be able to provide some value there. But yeah, I think it's just important, right? I mean, everyone has different backgrounds, experiences, and so I'm going to have blind sights myself, things that I don't see, right? That maybe if I approach it from a different angle, maybe there's a better outcome there. So I think that's where the coaching and mentoring comes in. It's really just about helping each other get better and improve on what you're doing. Whether that's on the, how do you operate and as a team in order to deliver value to the business, or, it could be more personal. It's like, as a manager, maybe how do I communicate what I need from folks, right? So it's a very broad area, right? You always in those mentoring relationships, you're kind of touching on a lot of them at different points, and so it's definitely every situation is different, so it's a challenge to think through each of those.
But is it like more opposite to like directional management when you just set tasks, or is it the complementary to the classic management style? I mean, being a mentor to your team members. like, like people describe like mentoring is like a specific managerial type, when you uh, give an opportunity to your team members to make mistakes, and out of this, and learn out of these mistakes, based on these mistakes. Yeah. So do you think it's more efficient, like, to have this style?
I mean, yeah, I think if you're allowing room for mistakes, I mean, that kind of aligns a little bit with how I would approach it. I mean, I'm not going to micromanage right down to the last detail. I think you're not going to find very happy employees, right? Like, I think my approach is really, I want to see everyone grow, right? I want to see them grow in their careers and their, how they communicate, like, so various things. So I think while I might potentially give tasks, it's more like, hey, it's a collaboration, right? I mean, just this week, talking to a couple engineering managers where we had some issues with one of our pages, and it was identified, call it a month ago, to where there was slowness for our users, and so we had identified it a month ago, but yet we hadn't put in some pretty easy changes, some missing indexes, right? So that would improve the queries and the load times, and so that was a good opportunity to work with those engineering managers to say, hey, how do we prevent, let's use this as an example. How do we prevent the next time from going a whole month before we actually get around to addressing something, right? Especially when you look at the cost versus reward aspect of it, right? Adding indexes takes no time at all, and yet the reward is a major decrease in page load times, right, for users. And so I think that's maybe one example to where it's a learning experience, and it's saying, okay, let's look at a situation, and then how do we learn from it, and then how do we get better? Is there something that engineering manager could start doing on a weekly basis to help prevent that, right, in the future? That might mean more regularly logging into your monitoring stack and looking at slow queries, right, things like that. So it's kind of I guess I approach it as nobody's perfect, I'm not perfect, but what we want to see is we want to improve, right, and get better at our craft every day. So.
Yeah, certainly. So I personally believe this is a really great approach when you allow the space for mistakes, but certainly you and all the team members need to learn on these mistakes and improve yourself, actually, and be more efficient. So hey, here is another question and topic I have. So actually, we're about fintech here, and you have experience with already a number of companies in fintech area. So the current is Maxwell, and also Dignify. This is the previous company, and Kickfurther. So why fintech? So why did you move to fintech space? What was interesting for you to do that?
Yeah, I guess I didn't purposely do it.
Okay.
Dignify, a Techstars company that I had contracted and worked with, about a year into when I moved to Boulder. One of the co-founders there had went and was a CTO at Dignify, and so he's a good friend and mentor to me. And I would just, we stay in touch. I get breakfast with him once a month. But, back then we had the relationship, not like it is today. But we knew each other. We worked together, and I was looking for a position, and so kind of joined there. And so I guess that was maybe the first foray into the fintech world. We were doing auto repair financing loans. So really interesting, problem space. If you think about somebody who, you go because your car breaks down and you bring it to an auto shop, right? And they tell you it's $1,500 to replace the transmission. And a lot of the US population is who we served, in a lot of cases, $1,500 out-of-pocket expense that's not planned is a really big deal for people. And and so that's kind of, we served, the vast majority of people. I would say we would serve people with like 800 credit scores potentially, but our majority of folks were people who had not as good credit, and really provided a service. And that company is still running, and but really strove to provide a good service that was really transparent and upfront to people on and helping them kind of get back on their feet as far as getting their car repaired, because a lot of times if people don't have a car, they can't get to work, and that's a really big deal, right? So providing a good service there.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And another question here. So as I understand, you are a photographer for a while, and you even traveled to like New Zealand, Australia, India, Taiwan, Laos, and to take photos, see people. But my question here is, how did that help your engineering career? So
that's a good question. I don't
maybe
know.
not like direct help.
I think it. I always
experience.
tell people, if you have the opportunity to travel, especially other countries, like do it, right? Because it's going to put you in uncomfortable situations potentially. It's going to, it's going to kind of broaden your outlook on things, right? So I think for me, I would say that was the biggest benefit of traveling, is just experiencing other cultures and seeing how other cultures approach things. It was just really interesting. And so I think I walked away. I traveled for close to about a year, but I walked away from that as, I would say I think coming back, just having more, I don't know, just being more grateful, right? Like it was just in the sense of like, I experienced a lot of hospitality, right? Like that was probably one of the biggest takeaways, is if I see somebody that's, maybe it's through a friend or something that's in the US, they're not from here, I tend to kind of offer up our house, to stay in, like basically just trying to extend the hospitality aspect, because I experienced it when I was in India, right? And had connections through various people here and there, but like, just when you experience that firsthand, it really helps you to realize that, hey, if somebody is traveling, it's a big deal to say, hey, let's go out to dinner, or we're offering a place to stay, or things like that. So I don't know. I think that's maybe a big one. I don't know if it directly impacted my career outside of more personal growth.
Yeah. So what is the perfect product user experience for you?
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you develop a software product, you basically need to develop UI UX, and so what do you think? What do you think is the perfect user experience that the product must have?
Yeah,
every product must have.
I mean, I think it gets down to simplicity. I can't remember who the quote was from, but basically it's it's something like the closer you can make something feel like magic, the better, as far as around like technology. And so I think the more seamless and potentially simple something can be, or the more it's like, oh wow, how did that happen? Like it feels kind of like magical. I think that's a good thing to have in your product if you can. Now, obviously, you don't want to hide everything so that like you don't know what's going on, right? But if you can kind of meet the a layout and design that's very simple, that's intuitive, right? You don't have to have a bunch of labels everywhere explaining what every single thing does, because it just makes sense. I think, that would be something I would strive towards. And obviously, it all depends on your user base, and, somebody who's younger, who kind of has grown up in technology, right, and the internet, is going to have different experience than, somebody who's, 80 right now. So you always have to take your audience in mind to figure out how you should be building those things.
Okay. Yeah, got it. All right. Yeah, because I was thinking that as soon as you have this photography experience, so maybe you're more visual, and this helps somehow in your professional life with the user interfaces. So okay.
Yeah, I think the art, as you get more into photography, right, you tend to, you learn about the different ratios and, kind of where your eye draws, right? So like, I think naturally, whether it's, if I'm taking a photo or I'm looking at a screen, I think for me, it's very quick to sort of point out that like something just doesn't feel right. I don't know. Like I don't love giving like the more like subjective answer, but I think sometimes in design and UX UI, it is a little bit of a gut feeling, but I think a lot of times I can sort of point to, hey, this doesn't look right because my eye is drawn over here, but our intent is that, the call to action's over here, but yet I keep looking in this direction, right? So I think that's maybe where the photography piece comes in, looking at user interfaces, and I can kind of quickly point out like some things, what's going on here, and then try to understand it a little bit more, what's happening. But yeah, the way your eye moves is very subconscious. It's like you don't think about it unless you actually, you're really trying to understand where am I naturally kind of going when I look at something.
Yeah, I think it's a great ability, by the way. All right. So let's talk about your current company, Maxwell. And actually, a part of my company mission in SART is to transform all verticals of the legacy financial industry, as we say, and also to provide the tools for people to achieve their financial freedom. And to me, it looks like Maxwell and Insart were a bit sharing the same views and mission, because you guys on a mission to continuously innovate solutions for local lenders, across the states, and also be a game changer for lenders serving different communities, local communities in America. So tell me, what exactly can be done by using Maxwell technology and platform? So what are the major features that you provide, actually?
Yeah. So when Maxwell started, through our co-founders, John and Ratul, they had actually gone through Techstars back in 2015, 2016. But, kind of as they had purchased a home and kind of experienced the home buying process as far as filling out a loan application, they didn't have a great one, which is kind of what led them to start the company. But so that's kind of the history of where we started with, as what's called in the industry a point of sale system. So typically you might think of a POS as, you go to a restaurant and swipe your card. At least that was kind of how I pictured it. So, but yeah, the point of sale is what the mortgage industry, considers essentially the intake of the loan application from a borrower, along with all of the documents and that process that has to happen, uploading driver's license and tax documents potentially, right? So all of those requirements to get a mortgage. So Maxwell has a point of sale system. That's what we started with. I think it was like the beginning of 2020. We started kind of branch of the company that was offering onshore kind of outsource model. So we hired a bunch of processors and underwriters, and those are folks who are, part of that mortgage application process. So typically what will happen is, as a borrower, you're talking to a loan officer, potentially a broker. Sort of for this conversation, we'll keep them as, similar folks, but they're the salespeople, right? They're talking to you because you want to get a mortgage, and they're telling you, hey, we can give you one for this rate. So you're saying, okay, great. Here's my application. Here's all the documents you need, right? Once all those things sort of get packaged, they get sent to a processor. The processor is going to look at it, making sure that everything is there that's needed, right? And they're going to probably be talking to the borrower to say, hey, you forgot, this, or hey, the bank statement only has page 1 of 3. We need all 3 pages. So various just requirements in that process. And once the processor kind of signs off on that, then that gets sent over to the underwriter. Underwriter is the one who's working for, that lender, who's going to say, yes, we should underwrite this loan, or no, we shouldn't because of various reasons. So that's all kind of a little bit of a brief description. There's other steps in that mortgage process, but so it is sort of like, if you think about an assembly line, it sort of definitely goes through a bunch of different stages, right? So we are concerned on just the point of sale, which is more of the borrower intake piece. And then a couple years ago, started out more on the operations side, where we hired processors, underwriters, and we have closers now too, who, if a lending company says, hey, we're swamped, we need extra support, they might contract with us for a year to say, we need 3 processors, 3 underwriters on our team, right? So we kind of embed them in their team. They operate according to however that lender does things. So that was sort of the very beginning part of our spread across, not just being on the point of sale and the entry piece, but really spreading across the whole mortgage chain. So now we have a due diligence team that'll do due diligence and quality control for loans for various companies. We have a capital markets team who's buying and selling loans, and we're just rolling out now basically what we're calling PLO, private label origination. So if you're a lender and you maybe don't want to continue with hiring all like full-time staff to staff up, a lending operation, you could essentially, we would provide that whole service for you, kind of white label, to where you would just get borrowers in, and we would take over from there and do the whole origination.
All right. In the media outlet Mortgage Professional America back to May this year, I actually read an article about Maxwell product. It was a kind of interview with Rutul, your CTO, and he specifically mentioned that Maxwell platform and technology has 3 major points of innovation. So let's talk about this a bit. So the first one was about creating an experience for borrowers, lenders, and other users. So in what way do you influence that process in your VP of engineering role right now? And also, what actually boosts the user experience and lender flow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of goes back to, is the product, is it clean? Is it simple? Is it usable, right? So we've been rolling out kind of what we're calling our enhanced loan application that we've been working on for a bit of time now. But when the company started, we had a very simple loan application process. It was kind of all one page with the whole thing, and so we've been converting our clients over to this new enhanced one, which is, it's, just very modern from a design standpoint. It's way more usable. It's, broken up into sections. It loads much quicker. So I think that would be one example of just, our platform wanting to offer the best in class experience for a borrower, right? If you go apply somewhere online, a lot of people expect that kind of Apple-like experience. And so that's kind of what our ELA conversion process has been. And, it's also enabling a lot of other functionality, right, that we didn't have in our old loan application. So along with that, just for the lender side too, right, being able to ensure that they have that similar type of experience. So, we're making a lot of changes there to make sure that we're staying up to date in our design library and converting old pages over to our new component library and everything there. So I think I guess you asked how I was involved. I mean, I'm involved in helping leading those teams. Yeah. I think when I first started, one of the first things I did was setting aside a time or making sure that the front end teams were thinking about, creating a component library. So we started that process when I joined. I joined over 3 years ago, but soon after that is when we first started that process, and it's paid off a lot of dividends and reusability across. We have another product that I didn't mention that we purposely built for processors and kind of their workflows, and so that component library is used across both products now, and it just speeds things up a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you that in fintech there is lots of space to keep the interfaces very clean and easier to use. And this is how we actually different from, legacy financial technologies, financial services, because like, for example, we all know and we all use applications from big banks. So they still trying to catch up with the user experience and user interfaces. So they, looks like the interfaces back to maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think, that's where, a company like Maxwell can really, it can help improve. If you're a medium, smaller size lending institution, I mean, a lot of them, they're not custom building, right? They're point of sales or other software.
Yes.
So, it's an important consideration because it is a first impression in a lot of cases, right, to a potential new banking employee. So if somebody walks in off the street or has, a friend who just got a mortgage with them and they experience an application process that's like really janky and, it's not intuitive and it doesn't feel modern, then, is that person going to say, oh, I had such a lousy experience applying for the mortgage. I want to go now get a bank account and other products from this lender, So that's always, something to keep, in mind, that there's I guess it's measurable to an extent, but, it's also that first impression that makes a big difference.
Okay. Yeah, so, the second point of innovation mentioned was that Maxwell also devoted much of its development to data and information and how to use and process it. And my question here is, so do you use any kind of data science, machine learning methods and approaches to help address the volumes of data involving borrower personal information, data about the loans, and maybe other data as well?
Yeah, I would say so. This year has kind of been a much bigger focus for us around our data and having a data science team. So, we've been working towards across different systems, getting things in our data warehouse so that we can start to analyze, patterns and figure those things out a little bit more. So I would say we're more in the infancy stage there. We do have some, different integrations and pieces of technology that, where we look to try to make the loan application process quicker for a borrower, right? So it's what we call quick apply. If they put in, it's basically their phone number to validate, and then last four of their social. We can pull back, different financial information to pre-fill a loan application for borrowers. So we've seen the clients that use that this numbers may be wrong, but I think it's fairly close. I think maybe a 10% improvement on application submission rates, right? So there's obviously a cost to that, but the benefit, right, with that percentage versus the cost is, for a lender, they should take that option every day if they're going to see those types of rates increase, because that's going to lead to more revenue and profits for them too. So,
and Chris, this third one, very important point, also related to the data, but from the security perspective. I mean, security is a big deal in the whole fintech space, but specifically on the Maxwell platform. So how do you protect sensitive data that flows through the system, and maybe what are the levels of security to protect personal data and information? So can you tell us a little bit here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, standard encryption at rest, those types of things. We have web application firewalls in front of our sites. We do yearly penetration testing and audits and everything there. So I don't think we do anything super out of the ordinary. I think, cover our bases and ensure that we're staying up to date with those things, making sure patches, software patches are applied, regularly. So, it's really keeping on top of those things as they change, and being aware of what's going on in the security world. So one of our engineers is big on that too. He's been writing, kind of just follows security updates as they happen, and we'll post that on our blog as kind of just a summary of major events that have happened. So yeah, I mean, we're always looking to improve that, and continue to make sure that we're adhering to best practices and standards and keeping on abreast of it.
Kyle, I also read that Maxwell has grown into something like more than 300 people during the last few years, and so my question here is, so how do you keep up with the strong culture within your organization? Because for us, it looks like, when you grow, there are a number of challenges, and one of the challenges to keep good engineering culture. So what can you tell us on that?
Yeah, so I would say we really kind of started growing a ton back on that operations side a couple of years back. And so I think one of the things we purposely did, and that our CEO ensured, was basically said, hey, as we are looking to grow rapidly, we need to maintain our hiring standards, right? And we want to make sure that we're hiring for people that match our values and our culture. And so that was a really big thing, as we, all of the operational leaders, myself included, were in a lot of those interviews in the early stages, because we didn't have a full-on recruiting team, and we were growing super rapidly. So I was doing interviews with people outside of engineering, and really it was kind of that the operational leaders were doing those as far as the culture fit, right? And making sure that we're keeping a high bar and ensuring that we're hiring people that that are gonna work well here at Maxwell. So I think it's a lot harder, once somebody gets through the door, if they don't match your values to where you're gonna have to let them go. That's the flip side of it. But if you can keep that gate narrower and ensure that you're filtering out those people beforehand, I think then you're going to have a lot less situations where you're going to have performance conversations and let people go. So I think overall as a company, as an engineering organization, we have done a really good job of doing that. I think that probably is, credited to our interview process and how we operate that, I guess. And so I think that it doesn't matter what role it is, like the values piece is a big chunk of it. And so as far as the engineering side, for whoever, when we were really scaling up hiring, we're not doing as much hiring now, but those initial conversations would generally look like a short conversation with a recruiter. And then generally I was the one who was having that next conversation with somebody, and I was really evaluating for those values and experience, but we weren't getting into nitty-gritty technical details, but I don't know, when you have experience in an industry, you can filter out and you can kind of see who's maybe not whose resume doesn't necessarily match up as well with their experience. And so those first interviews are really about a culture fit and experience level, and then from there the team would kind of take on more of those technical discussions and really dive in there, and then we kind of come back together and make a kind of a group decision on, does this person, do we want to extend an offer or not, and kind of use all of those inputs. So I think just ensuring that values and making sure you have questions around those that'll maybe dig into those values for your company are really important.
So how do you make sure there is a cultural fit with your team of the candidates?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, like our company values it's the ROCKS acronym: rigor, ownership, curiosity, kindness, and straight up. So it's really about my questions, those questions that you're asking people are, hopefully you're having questions on each of them. And then if somebody gives you an answer, I like to ask why, because I like understanding and put somebody a little bit off the spot, not being mean or anything, but it's like, oh, you mentioned that, like, let's dig in there. Like, can you explain more? Right. And so really trying to understand that, right? So does somebody have good examples to where they really own something, right, and saw it from beginning to end? How many questions are they asking? Are they curious? Are they giving, do they have examples to where curiosity led them to change their mind or a different situation, a different solution? Are they kind? Like, we don't want to work with people who generally, like the no a-hole policy, right? Like we want people that are kind, so I think each company obviously is going to have different focus on different areas. And so it's really about, in the interview process, can you evaluate those things, right? And so if people, really shone through on like how they demonstrated those things in past experiences, then, for the most part, they had the experience, they had all of those in alignment, and they would move on to that next stage to really get down to more of the technical evaluation.
So do you think having the engineers hired with the good cultural fit helps you to retain the team members going forward in your team?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we haven't had a ton of attrition in the past 2 or 3 years on the engineering side. And so I think from an attrition level, like we've done really well. And I think I would attribute that to the culture, right? That like people generally enjoy each other, and, we get along well. And, hopefully we're having some fun too, right, in it. And so I think it's a balance. Like, culture is a balance, right? You obviously want to deliver value to the business, but you also, there has to be some breathing room, right? And there has to be, you have to have some, like, I don't expect everyone to be like best friends, right? But you have to have camaraderie, and, you have to get along, right? And so I would say our team does that in spades, and really, generally gets along really well. And, there hasn't been many instances where we've had to let anyone go on purpose.
Okay.
Performance issues.
So hey, here is another question. So when the company grows and the product grows, and you have a grown number of clients, uh, you actually need to add more and more features. And there is also a situation to find a balance between adding more features because your clients demand some additional features, or your sales team demands some additional features for some potential clients, and also fighting the technical debt. So we actually found this is a kind of situation probably each company experience, and everyone tries to find this balance between adding new features and fighting the technical debt, because when you fight the technical debt, it looks like you're not adding like value to the product. Yep. So what's your view on this, and what experience do you have at Maxwell with that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we started doing a year or two ago, I started it with just the front end team because I was a little bit closer at the time, but then that quickly moved to kind of other teams. But I started the meetings. We had another engineer who said, "Oh, this is kind of what Spotify called guild meetings." So we adopted the language, right? But yeah, I think those guild meetings, we have a back end, a front end, a QA one, a data one. And I think those have been really helpful to move like some of those initiatives away from like what I maybe would want to see from a technical debt perspective, or what our CTO would want. And so it's really empowering the teams and the individuals to come up with that list, right? Because that's really what I want, right? I don't want everything dictated from the top. I want engineers to feel empowered to own their systems and the things that they're responsible for, right? And so a lot of that can come from that meeting, to where it's saying, it's not used just for technical debt, right? It might be on the back end one, it might be a specific pattern that, somebody put into place for some new feature, and they want to share it with the team, and get input, or, hey, maybe we should adopt this across different code bases, right? Things like that. But a lot of it may also be, different tech debt decisions, or, things that we want to make sure that we're thinking about for the quarter, right? So that means Ruby upgrade from 2.7 to 3.
Okay.
From there, it's, it's more from the bottom up, and then saying, okay, if this is something that we want to do as an engineering team, how do we accomplish that, right? Like, action has to come out of that. And I'll make the case all day long for that tech debt and addressing the tech debt. If the team is telling me, hey, this is a big deal, this is what we want to do, I'll fight, and work with product to get that on the roadmap. And so I think it's really some of that more bottom up. From there, it's, can the engineering managers start to help plan in their sprint process, different pieces of work, right, to do that. So we generally, across the teams, we say anywhere from, call it 10 to 20% on a sprint we want to see as like tech debt being handled. So I think, we've done pushes, like bigger pushes, where it's a very big focus. So Rails upgrade we did, I think, a year ago, to go from 3 to 4 was like a good chunk of a quarter or two, right? And a big initiative. We did that again this year to get the Rails 5 too. And then, we're trying to work on how do we stay more ahead of those things, right? And so that discussion is in the back end guild, for instance, or even the front end guild, right? Making sure we're staying up to date on React versions and things like that. So I think it comes down to finding ownership and finding somebody that can help carry those things forward and is going to help lead those things. And then, individual engineers, hopefully stepping up and saying, yeah, I want to tackle this piece and contribute to it. And so it's certainly a cycle, because you have to continue talking about it, so that otherwise it can get lost in the shuffle, right, of just new features all the time. And so I think there's a mix that everyone should be considering and thinking about those things, and then presenting them, bringing them up to the team, and then working towards, making improvements there. So that's kind of how we've kind of tackled it. I think, we'll try to introduce things like linters that call out, things that should be changed. I think what I've seen with that is that unless you make more of a proactive initiative, something like that doesn't necessarily, a linter warning saying, hey, use this instead of this, doesn't always affect change, as well as, saying, hey, as a team, what do we want to rally around? And can we set a goal to accomplish something around our tech debt for the quarter, and then really taking steps to actually to do that.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned that you structure the teams with the guild approach. So maybe can you tell us a bit about how you structure the team?
Yeah. So the guilds are not. So our teams are, kind of product squads or pods or whatever you want to call it. The engineering manager, engineers, designer, product manager. So that's kind of how our teams are structured. The guild is really about that. As we grew and started having multiple teams, that's kind of where I saw the need that we needed to have better cross-team collaboration. So that's kind of what that really serves on, is allowing the engineers to share information about things that they're working on, patterns they're putting into place, tech debt items they're running into. So it's really a cross-team kind of meeting is what those guilds serve as. And then, like I said, that's kind of how our teams are managed as far as the product teams.
So is it more about knowledge sharing?
The guilds specifically?
Yes, the guild specifically. Is it more about knowledge sharing between, cross-functional teams that you have?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an opportunity to, because each team's operating in their own cadence, and their focus of our product and what they're working on. So without kind of that bigger group meeting, we didn't have the opportunity as much, right, to say, hey, I ran into this thing or this tech debt, and there's some other avenues that we kind of try to have the teams collaborate kind of on that broader manner. But those guilds have really been instrumental in making sure that we're considering tech debt, right? Because the back-end one, it's open to anyone. We have front-end engineers who sit in on the back-end one and vice versa. But it's really about, the focus is for that back-end one. Okay, are there tech debt back-end items that we need to be thinking about, right? And so we, like most companies, probably have a long list of various tech debt initiatives that we want to accomplish and get more up to speed on. And so, it's really that cross-team collaboration is what those serve as. And and it can be knowledge sharing. People present something that they ran into or that they learned recently. So I'm really big on knowledge sharing. So whether it's through the guild meeting, every other week we have an engineering learning session, and that's really, these are all of these that I'm mentioning. The agendas are not set by me. It's from the engineers, right? So that the ask is, hey, if you have something to teach, here's an avenue, right? Here's a way to get back to the team to share the knowledge that you maybe just learned or that you already knew. And so we've had really good, various discussions in those outlets for people to share or present new things.
So do you use any kind of data analytics to and gather some analytics about your product behavior to improve the product?
We use Pendo is kind of what our product team uses the most to see how our different features are used. We have Google Analytics, so typical stuff. I think that's one of the things I think we're always looking to improve, right? Are we measuring the right things to know that what we're building and releasing is providing that value? So that's always something, a conversation that we're always readdressing and making sure that we are able to see value in those things.
All right. So so maybe my very last question here. Let's talk a bit about the future. And and my question is here. So if you have a chance, maybe in future, to build your own fintech product, and this is about the trends, what do you see on the market? So what would this product be about?
How can the process be less manual, right, and potentially more automated? So those are things that we're evaluating and looking at, continuing to build upon. So if you think about, the OCR, so the other product I mentioned that's built for the processor, there's OCR tech in there to automatically validate information and documents, pull the information out, right? So that you're not copy pasting things. So I think what you see in our industry specifically is more effort towards some of that automation, right? How do you reduce the manual pieces that a processor is working on, for example? Or so like typically, let's say a processor could have, I think on average it's like 30 loans a month in their pipeline. Our question is, how do we innovate with technology that's going to make that processor twice as efficient to where they can carry 60 loans in their pipeline, right? And so there's obviously technology and software can do things better than humans can do. And so can we alleviate those things from a processor so that they can focus on what they do best, which is from a human perspective, evaluating the output of some of those validations and then talking to the customer, talking to the borrower, answering those questions, right? So I think, that's what we're really seeing in the industry is a move towards a more streamlined kind of loan application factory, if you want to call it that, right? So that's where we're looking to innovate and continue to put resources towards.
All right, Kyle. So it was really a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for sharing all your experience and how to develop the product and how to establish really great teams.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it and appreciate it.
Yeah, and also to all our viewers and listeners again. So you're welcome to put all your comments and questions below this video. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And tell us what you think, how to develop the best fintech products. And again, Kyle, thank you, and stay tuned and healthy. See you next time.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.